Here on the right we can see the plan that we devised in the analysis video, and we can see that here we have 3 functions that we need to implement. I will create a new script and I will start with the main function. And if we take a look here, we can see that there are 2 things we need to do here. We need to call 2 functions, the other 2 that we have here in gray and blue. So this is what we need to do here. And if I start writing the code, and we see here that, alright, we don't have this function yet. So maybe we can create it. And if we take a look in our plan here, we can see that first we need to create an empty list. Then we should open the file for reading, read all the lines, and then close the file. I'll write the code, and I think what I will use here is the with open as construct, which will help us with the closing part, because then Python will automatically close the file for us when we are done. And how would that look in code then? So with the code written, let's see what I did. So we first create an empty list, as we said, we have that up here. Then I added a little bit of a comment for myself, so I know what I need to do to say that, alright, we shall read all contestants from the file and add them to a list of tuples, just so that I remember that it is tuples that I want to create. And then I specify how the tuple shall look. So it's more a comment for myself, so I know what I'm about to do. And then I use this construct with open as. So we open this file given as a parameter. We open it to read it, and we're going to call it the data. After we are done with this code block here, it will automatically be closed for us, which is kind of neat. Then we don't have to remember to close it. We just know that Python does it for us. And then in the loop here, we see that, alright, or in the with block, we see that we're going to have a loop. And this loop will continue as long as there are more lines in the file. And what do we do here? We read a line, we check if it's not empty, but if it is empty, we set it, we mark it as, right, there are no more lines, meaning that we will exit the loop. But if the line is not empty, what do? We split it, and then we use the different parts to create a tuple. So when we split it, we take the first part, which is the name, and have that as the first element here. And then we use something that we haven't seen before. We use one of the built-in functions in Python called map. So what does this do? I think it's easier if we start by looking at what we have here. So one of the arguments is this list slicing that we do here. So we have split our line into parts, which becomes a list. And then we take everything but the first element. So we skip the name, but we take all the numbers. That is what this part do. But remember, when we read them from a file, they are strings. But we want them as integers, so that we later on can sum them and show a total. So here we take the list, all elements but the name, and that is one of the arguments to the map function. The other argument is int. So what we are doing with the map function is that we are casting all of the strings into integers. So the result of this is that we no longer have strings, we have ints. And that is the second part here of the tuple. And after that, we have created one contestant. So we have read one line and we have created this that we just talked about. Then we add it to the list. We do that for all the lines, and after that we return all the contestants. And if we go down and see, right, when we have read them, what is the next thing we should do? then we should display them. And what we added here in main is just one line. But of course we have also the need to create the function. So let's do that. Let's take a look at the code that we added here. So if we take a look first at the plan, we see that we should display a header that corresponds to this line here. Or well, these two lines, because we draw this line too. And then after that, we should have a loop to calculate the total for each contestant, show the contestant's name and this total we calculated. So we see here what I did is that I created a for loop that uses the contestants that we created before and sent as an argument here as the thing to loop over. And what does this contain? It contains two things. It's the name, and remember that the second part is all the scores. So I said that, all right, I want to loop over this, but please give me the name and the score, both the things from the tuple that is in here. So now instead of having to look in the tuple each time, I get them right away. So we calculate the total of the score, and after that we print both of them with some formatting. And in the end we just add an extra empty line. Now let's try to run it and see what happens. And we see that I get an error, so somewhere I made a mistake. We can see that it can't find contestants. Let's take a look here at line 24. So it can't find it here. I forgot there should be an S here. Now maybe let's try to run it again. We can see here that the output is empty. So there is something that is wrong here in our script. And let's see if we can find what it is. So if we assume that the file is there and that there is data in the file, what could be wrong? If we take a look here in the open, when we open the file, we read a line and we say if the line is not empty, we shall say that there are no more lines. Otherwise we shall do all of this stuff. But we shall only exit the loop if it is equal to an empty line. So we, by mistake, did it the opposite way. So let's see if we run it now, what happens. We get another error in line 15. So let's see here. We missed an S here too. We missed an S before too, so we missed one here too. And now we can see, now it's working. Now we can verify that these are the correct scores by looking in the file, but we can also assume that they are correct. So we can see what we did here. We wrote quite a bit of code to solve this task, and it corresponds to what we have in our plan here. But there is something to note here, something to take with us. It is much easier to solve a task if we have a plan, but if something goes wrong, it's always important to go back and see, all right, what can go wrong? And in this case, we had a few spelling mistakes which we were informed about when we tried to run our script. But we also had a problem here where we by mistake wrote not equal to. So in the end, we managed to fix all those errors. The important thing is to not get stressed when you have an error. It's better to look at your plan, look at your code, and see if you can find what the problem is. If you start by looking in the code, if you don't find it there, go back and check your plan, make sure that what you have written corresponds to what you have in the plan. And if you can't find it, then don't be afraid to ask a friend for help. It's always good to have someone else look at your code and give you some feedback. We also saw here that we used a built-in function called map. We used tuples and we used list slicing. So we used a lot of new things here too, besides trying to track down the errors that we had when we wrote the script. And that is something we need to take with us for the future. We will always run into problems when we write our code, so we must know how to solve them.